RP here, and today's video is me reading scary Reddit stories from r/NoSleep. And if you've been living under a rock for a while and do not know what r/NoSleep is, it's a collection of Reddit horror stories. Now keep in mind that these stories may be exaggerated, false, but they're otherwise very, very creepy. Most of them deal with things such as the dark web, creeps, and above all, scary, scary things of the world. Now I'm probably going to read about 2 or 3, but I may do one more for this video for bonus points. And since it is October, and October is the month for spookiness, I decided why the heck not, since I'm also reading r/Untitled Parent stories. That being said, sit back, relax, get some of your favorite Halloween candy, a plushie to cuddle, a blanket to hide under, and let's get this show on the road. My mother's cult won't leave me alone. I tried posting this to r/insane parents, but my post ended up being taken down. The mods told me to, quote, stick to posting my creative writing pieces on r/NoSleep. So here I am. They didn't believe me. Maybe you guys will. Life growing up in my parents' household was more or less standard fare in regards to what you might find any given day on r/insane parents. Authoritarian is the most conservative term I can use to describe them. Batty insane dictators would be far more accurate. When my phone wasn't outright confiscated, which it was more often than not, all my texts and calls were monitored, and they used the device itself to track my location. I could hardly step outside of the house for anything other than school or church. With a few friends, quote-unquote, I was allowed to have had to be personal vetted and approved by them. No one from outside of the church, and no one whose parents they didn't personally know. Frankly, most of their situations were hardly anything better than my own. Honestly, I could go on for hours about everything I went through under their roof, but that isn't the point of my post here. To sum it up, things really started coming to a head around the time I was coming close to my 18th birthday. I suppose the fact that they would soon lose any legal control over me awakened some sense of urgency in them. This ended up becoming a time of great self-discovery for me. Over the years, I'd managed to sneak my way out of their watchful eyes and not to learn some measure of common sense. I knew that their treatment of me was far from normal, despite how they might argue otherwise. I was forming my own opinions and growing into the gay, liberal-minded woman that I am today. Who could have guessed that the influence of my controlling, religious, conservative parents could push me so far in the other direction? Being the brash young teenager I was at the time, I decided that I wasn't going to hide who I was anymore. I was going to stand up to my parents. You'd think I might know better after all those years under their thumb. In a way, I suppose I should be glad that I only developed severe anxiety after they sent me to the gay conversion camp. I know several other victims of just that place in particular that came back a hell of a lot worse than me. I don't like to talk or even think much about all of what happened to me there. I'm already practically hyperventilating just from writing this. Needless to say, it isn't exactly surprising that I didn't end up sticking around for much longer after I turned 18. I'm 26 now, and I've managed to build a decent life for myself. It hasn't been easy, sure, but I've managed to make it work. The advice I've gotten online from so many helpful, understanding people has especially helped the process of distancing myself from my parents and becoming independent. I'm still embarrassed whenever I have to tell a new employer to never accept calls from anyone claiming to be my parents. It sucks not having any family to go home to around the holidays. The scars they left on my life will never truly heal. In spite of all it though, I've made it work. 3 years ago, my parents actually divorced. Since then, my father and I have been trying to work on a relationship a bit. We're on speaking terms, but not much more than that. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about him, but he's been trying. Time and some measures of clarity has really seemed to change the man. I seriously doubt we'll be able to truly see eye to eye on most things, but the guilt that he's expressed about how he treated me growing up seems genuine. To hear him tell it, he and my mother were not the united front they had appeared to be from my perspective. By his account, she was always the main driving force in all the decisions they had made. He had gone along with and agreed with everything, but she held all power in the relationship. To be honest, I'm not sure how true all of that is exactly, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was embellishing a bit, but given how my mother has declined since the divorce, I wouldn't be surprised if it were. Things have been in a bit of a downhill slide for her as of late. She's been surviving largely off of alimony payments, unemployment benefits, and whatever else she can manage to scrape together. Her living situation has been chaotic at best. She's been bouncing around from apartments to shelters, to couches, and even the street on occasions, after getting kicked out for either poor behavior or for simply not paying. It's not just her financial and living situation though. Without my father and I around, her mental state has started to deteriorate as well. With no outlet for all of her craziness, she has been incapable of maintaining her carefully manicured facade for normalcy. It's even getting to the point where it's affecting the one thing in her life that I believe she ever truly cared about: church. I would need another set of hands to count the numbers of churches that have politely asked her to never come back. Now, this is all secondhand information that I've learned from my father. Despite their split, and in spite of all she's done, he can't help but care for the woman. He tries to keep up with her situation as best he can, worrying about her all the while. He's tried to convince her to get help, but it never ends up working out well. I listen to him talk about her, just be polite, but in truth, I couldn't care less about her hardships. The most I've ever felt for her over the past several years has been a cold disdain for her very existence. That, and a tiny amount of amusement with how far she's fallen. A feeling that I try not to think too much about or acknowledge. Other than that, I tend to bury my memories, feelings, and trauma deep down inside, only to emerge semi-regularly during therapy. However, keeping my distance from it all has been rather difficult as of late. You see, somehow my mother has managed to get herself involved in a cult, and now, for whatever reason, they seem to have their sights set on me. It started small, nothing more than a simple pamphlet that was slid under my apartment door one morning. I didn't think much of it, as I got those sorts of things all the time. It was usually restaurant menus and the like, but this wasn't the first odd one I received. The name of the organization, the Feather of the Malefas, did strike me as odd, though while it did draw a second glance, it in no way received a third. Much like all my junk mail, it found its way directly into my garbage can. I didn't suspect it was directed at me. Why would I? I figured everyone in my building had gotten one. It was short after a while that the solicitors started showing up. I thought they were Mormons or something at first. They certainly looked the part, dressed up as they were. I suppose the choice was intentional. I was planning on politely listening for a bit before shooing them away. However, when the first words out of their mouths were, "Your mother has told us a lot about you," I slammed the door right in their faces. They stood at my door for nearly an hour after that, not knocking again, calling out to me, or even moving for that matter, just staring at the door and smiling. I know because I watched them through the peephole the whole time. It wasn't until another hour passed after they left and I was finally able to calm down. Since then, they haven't stopped coming by. At first, it was the same two people, but after I reported them to the police for harassment, they started getting creative. Since then, it hasn't been the same people even once. It's been an endless stream of pizza I never ordered, repairmen that no one had called, packages I wasn't expecting, and more new neighbors stopping by to say hi than I even think we have apartments in the building. They all try to talk to me about the will of the Malefas, about how my mother has been saved, and how she wants the same for me. They even started trying to bother me while I'm just walking around in the city and at work. I think they have people following me too. It's absolutely insane. It's not like I haven't considered the possibility of it all being in my head. I'm somewhat familiar with this sort of thing from therapy, and it certainly looks like some grand paranoia delusion. I'm far from confident in the soundness of my own mind from experience. However, it's not just me. I mentioned what's been happening to my father, and he heard of the name the Malefas before. According to him, it's the last religious group that my mother had mentioned since she'd fallen out of contact 3 months prior. It's not odd for her to be out of contact with him for often weeks at a time, but she's never been this silent for so long. Besides, this reeks of some sort of thing that she might try and pull. Even now, after all these years, she hasn't ever truly let go. She's never given up on trying to get her claws back into me. It hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped just at harassment though. As of last night, things have escalated far beyond that, and I'm more than a little scared for my own safety. Desperately needing to get my mind off of things, I have made the ill-advised decision to spend a night out in the town with some of my friends, naively believing that a large group might keep my harassers at bay. In truth, I didn't really think that going out would help much, though I was more or less willing to try anything at this point, especially if it meant getting out of the house. I'd spent so much time hiding away in my home that I was starting to get more than a little stir-crazy. We had some vague plans as to what we might do, but they essentially boiled down to meeting up in one of our favorite bars and just seeing where the night takes us. Eager as I was, I ended up arriving at the bar about half an hour early. I found my way to a seat at the bar, where I ordered a drink and set about messing around on my phone while I waited for my friends to arrive. I didn't sit alone for long though, as, after about 10 minutes, someone I didn't know plopped down in the seat next to me. On the edge from all that had been going on lately, I jumped a bit and my eyes shot upwards toward the new arrival. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was another Solitor, but I was most certainly surprised when my gaze fell upon the most beautiful woman I've seen in my entire life. It was as if someone had plucked her from my deepest fantasies. Slim, with suitable but abundant curves, dark hair that I wanted to run my hands through, deep brown eyes that I wanted to get lost in, and a pearly white smile that made me shiver. I could barely stop myself from stuttering when I answered her greeting with a quiet hello. Despite my awkwardness and ever-present anxiety, she was more than willing to be patient and ease into a conversation. I really appreciated that. Soon enough, I found myself relaxing and opening up to her. It wasn't until I realized just how tense I'd been, like a rabbit that was ready to sprint off at the sound of a twig snapping. After a while, it felt like all my stress was simply melting away. This woman, Elaine, just had some sort of effect on me. She had this sort of charisma that just draws you in. It was like we were the only two people in the entire room. She was giving me her undivided attention, and it felt good. It made me feel special. We talked about our interests, our beliefs, and all about ourselves. We had a lot in common, and I felt a spark of something special that I truly hope was mutual. I shared things with her that I've never shared with anyone, and still can't quite explain why. She just had this way of coaxing it out of me. At some point, I noticed my friends arriving. We saw each other as they came through the door, and they began to come over to the bar before they took note of my company. Quickly changing course to a table some distance away, they sent a few secretive smiles and sly winks my way as they passed. Distracted by their arrival, I looked away from my drink for a few seconds at most. I guess that was just enough time. Not wanting to be a bad friend, I stood up for a few minutes later to join them. I turned to Elaine, intending to thank her for the lovely conversation, excuse myself, and maybe even ask for her number. However, when I went to speak, I couldn't get the words out. It was like I was nervous or reluctant though. I simply couldn't. It was as if my vocal cords could have been cut by an unseen pair of scissors. Something was very, very wrong. I turned to Elaine, trying to desperately explain what was going on with the silent wheezes and wild hand gestures. She just smiled. Her lips parted, and the words that made their way out struck me like a bolt of lightning. "You know," she said, "you're just as beautiful as your mother." It was then that whatever she had slipped into my drink kicked in, and I collapsed into her waiting arms. Things understandably get more than a little blurry for me after that. Clearly, I haven't exactly been whisked away into the clutches of some mysterious cult. At least, not yet. From what I understand, Elaine tried to carry/lead me towards the back door, acting like I'd simply had too much to drink, or something along those lines. I was lucky my friends were there. They confronted her and managed to get me away before I could be led away from prying eyes. Elaine did, however, manage to slip away before anyone could stop her. I woke up in the hospital a few hours later with a splitting headache, but thankfully unharmed. That didn't do much to help my anxiety over it all. Clearly, this cult was determined to have me, and they weren't afraid to take drastic measures. I couldn't find the words to explain what was going on to my friends, and I wasn't sure if I'd speak to them even if I could. I didn't want to risk their safety by involving them in my own mess. The doctor, likely noticing how wound up I was already, quickly administered a light sedative before opting to tell me the bad news. It was probably a good move on his part. The thing is, the people at the hospital weren't able to identify what Elaine had dosed me with. They were certain it wasn't roofies, or the other usual suspects at least. However, all they could tell for sure beyond that was that the sample they were able to get from my glass seemed to be herbal in nature. I seemed to be fine, but they really had no way of telling for sure at the moment. They'd send a sample off for testing, but until they got the results back, they couldn't be sure that there wouldn't be any sort of lasting effects. I opted to go home rather than stay in the hospital for observation. In truth, I don't really feel all that much safer here than I did at the hospital. At least I can lock and barricade the door if needed to be. I didn't know what these people want me for, and I'm scared of the lengths they might go to. I called Dad, and he's going to come out and stay with me until we can get all this figured out. Call me crazy, but in spite of it all, I just really need a parent right now. I haven't heard back from the hospital. I'm more than a little worried about what they might say when I do, but I have some confidence. I feel fine for the most part. I'm shaky as all hell, and that headache still hasn't gone away, but that can mostly be chalked up to stress. I haven't noticed anything especially strange. Well, there's one thing. There's this crow that I keep seeing through my bedroom window. It's this ugly, diseased-looking thing that makes me feel slightly ill just from looking at it. Though it doesn't look healthy, in any sense of the word, it's incredibly large. Larger than the crows are supposed to get, I think. It's hard to judge for sure, as it never gets too close. It's been out there, perched on the roof of the building opposite to me, for quite some time now. It's been a few hours since I noticed it. Somehow, I've convinced myself that it's watching me. I hope Dad gets here soon. Holy freaking crap, man! I really hope that this person's okay. And if this story is a little bit fabricated and rather false, then this is a message about religious cults and overly religious parents. Now, it's a good thing that the dad is like, okay, my wife's all cray-cray, it's time for a divorce. But the mother, however, she's not ready to let go because she has her boy Jesus, who she practically cares more than anything for, and joins a religious cult. Which, from what I'm reading in the comments of this Reddit post, it could be a Satan-worshipping cult, I believe. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but if anyone in the comments could tell me about the Malifas, then please tell me in the description below. Or they could be a very religious Christianity group, I'm not 100% sure. All I know is that they're a very religious cult and will do anything in their power to force people into whatever religion they're worshipping for God knows what. And boy, that can't be good for your health. Now, I've said this a million times before, but I grew up in a Christian family, and I thank God that my family wasn't this overly religious cult where parents put the fear of God into their children, because that's not the way to go. Gently ease your children into the religion. And as of now, there are no updates on this Reddit post, but this story could be a little bit fabricated, but I'm not 100% sure, though it is a message to what can happen to a person that is so freaking devoted to religion that they will go to any and all lengths to be in God's good name. And this person's mother is a fine prime example of that. This happened about a year and a half ago. Names have been changed. I used to work at a gas station, where this one particular customer was a regular. Throughout the interactions with this guy, I figured out there was some off way about the way he socialized. This guy would ramble for minutes and minutes and minutes at a time, until you told him you had to serve someone else. Even if there was a queue, he would still ramble. I was the new girl at the station, and everyone told me they avoided serving him because he made them feel uncomfortable. Yet they never trespassed him or asked him to leave. Let's call him Tom. Tom was in his mid-40s and ran some kind of unregistration, probably someone illegal lawn mowing company, where he would mow lawns for people and they would pay him cash. I feel sorry for his customers because I wouldn't really want this guy on my property or knowing where I lived. It started off relatively harmless, but harmless always get freaking tiring. So He used to comment on my smile, how he liked the shape of my face and mouth. Weirdo. He also used to comment on my hair, which I used to dye red. It's actually part of the reason I stopped dyeing it. He even stroked it a few times. I told my site leader that I thought he was weird, and he was always commenting on my looks, and I was getting sick of it. She literally said,
"Well, none of us kissed his ass, so he leaves us alone now."
That really pissed me off, because I never kissed his ass, only politely served him and asked him not to behave certain ways. Secondly, he never left them alone. They used to run into the back room and make me serve him. One day, my coworker died of a heart attack and died suddenly, not at work. I was really upset because he was particularly the only nice coworker towards me. There were a lot of bitchy women working at this station who talked about me and made fun of me behind my back, even though I was constantly doing their work and pulling double shifts regularly. This coworker was a really wonderful older guy, pushing me to talk to my boss about becoming a manager. Naturally, I was upset and cried a couple times in my shift, but once I was alone for the night, I had to hold myself together for the customers. Tom came in. It was around 8 or 9 p.m., and we have a policy called controlled door. Basically, we unlock the door for anyone who we think won't rob us. After 10 p.m., no customers were allowed in. So yeah, Tom was buying 2 bottles of Coke or something. I let him in because I wasn't that threatened by him at this point, and I was a bit off during that shift, since my coworker had just died that day. He approaches the counter and mentions that I look sick or upset, and how he heard that so-and-so passed away. I just said yes, and I said I was feeling a bit sad. Without warning, he grabbed me by the neck and pulled me across the counter into an awkward and painful hug because my legs were hanging midair. I didn't say anything because I was literally so taken aback and frankly scared. Tom then said,
"I noticed you had the doors locked, and then you unlocked it for me. That must mean you trust me."
I made some excuse about how he needed to clean the coffee machine now, and he needs to leave so I can monitor the cameras. The way he had grabbed me left a sore pain in my neck for literally weeks. The next few days I told my site leader what happened, and she told me in a snarky way that I should have made an incident report the night it happened. I told her I forgot because I was shaken up. She said she would get him trespassed. A couple of nights when I was leaving around 10 p.m., he would be outside, around the corner of the building, and offering to take me home. I always refused, and quickly got to my ride. I told my site leader and asked when the trespass was happening, and she said she was discussing it with her boss. A few more creepy comments and occurrences happened when people finally started asking him to leave. By this point, everyone was aware of his behavior towards me, and were actively telling him to leave. I got fed up and handed in my resignation since he had been officially trespassed. It took me handing in my resignation for them on that day to go to the police and then have a sit down with me and try to convince me not to leave. I said my mind was made up. My coworkers were mean people, and this guy was harassing me. I wasn't going to put my health on the line for a job at a gas station. In my last couple of weeks, they switched me in between 2 other different sites, so Tom wouldn't know where I was, and to get away from my regular coworkers. My main site at the time was amazing. The coworkers were supportive and super friendly. The site leader was sympathetic, and even on more than one occasion warned me when he was approaching the store. They got me to the back of the room on time, and then went off with Tom for looking for me, telling him to leave, and that he was calling the police. I forgot to mention that when I was placed on other sites, he would drive to each site every day to ask where I was. Someone from my old site told him. I still don't know who it was, or why they would do a thing like that, even if they disliked me. Thankfully, I only worked there for a couple of more weeks, and most of the people were proactive in keeping him away from me. After I left the job, I decided I wanted to start going to the same church my dad goes to. He swore by the church. So, I read some reviews and literally found a review by Tom that was very recent, saying the church was great. I decided to tell Dad about Tom, and said I was too scared to go to the church. Dad said Tom was harmless, and he had Asperger's, and didn't mean to be weird about stuff. I told Dad that he would wait for me late at night, in dark areas beside my work. He would follow me in between workplaces. One time I worked a half day at Site 1, then drove to Site 2 for the other half of my shift, and he was driving beside me. He made comments about how I looked, and how I was just an amazing person countless and countless times. That just became tiresome and creepy. Dad ended up speaking to the pastor,
and the pastor told him that he had actually been banned from the church a few days ago for inappropriately hugging the women there. His wife actually came to the church to complain. She did the same thing at my workplace, saying he was innocent and had done nothing wrong. I don't know if she's stupid or in denial. Anyway, I moved cities away from where I used to live, and I am very thankful that Tom never found out where I lived or hurt me in any way. I look back on those times where he waited for me in the car park at 10 p.m. and literally shudder the thought. So Tom, let's never meet up again. I'm doing great without you. P.S. Sorry for rambling.
Oh boy. I have got a lot of strong comments about this one. First of all, the co-workers and the site manager at the workplace are fucking bitches. Like, you know this girl's uncomfortable. You should have done something immediately before. And if I were her in her position, I would have quit immediately, contacted the police, and say, nope, fuck you guys, fuck your gas station, and fuck all of y'all, because y'all are bitches. And afterwards, I would have gotten a restraining order on this Tom guy. Again, whether the story is fabricated or not, I am very glad that this person is now in a safe area where Tom is not. And I hope this Tom guy is literally in jail. Same for his wife. Okay, I'm gonna try to do one more, and that'll be it for this video.
I was working at a job training place for people with disabilities and mental illness. I was working at this place for 2 months. I met a lot of nice people while I was there. I even became friends with them. Everything was fine the first week. On the second week, I saw this guy standing by my locker. He would stand by my locker in the morning or when I'm getting my stuff to leave. He walked up to me when I was getting my stuff and getting ready to leave. He said, "Hey," then asked for my number. I should have never given him my number. I was being nice, and I wanted more guy friends. I gave it to him and got in my mom's car. As soon as my mom left the parking lot, my phone went off. He was already texting me. He just saw me. He would text me every hour of the day and ask,
What are you doing?
or,
Do you have a boyfriend?
I already told him I was seeing someone right now, but he didn't get it. He would grab my butt or grab my waist when I was at work. I would tell him to stop, but he would laugh like I was joking or something. This went on for 2 months. I told him I didn't like him, and he wasn't my type. But he would call me or text me all the time, and every time I told him I didn't like him, he would cry and stop texting me. Then he would text me again and say he loves me, and I'm his queen. I blocked him after that.
Okay, I've never had this experience before, but bitch, if you grab a girl's butt or her waist and she tells you to stop, don't fucking laugh at it, unless you want to get bitch slapped in the face, or Birdie a punch in the mouth, or get hit in the face with a chair. No means no, bitch! And honestly, if that were me, I'd report it to the manager, his ass get fired, I get a restraining order, and bada bing, bada boom. Bye-bye, creepo flakes. Now, I'm not one of those people who think, oh, men are misogynistic, oh, they're sex predators to women and children. But this is a prime example of why feminazis and extremists are becoming more and more hateful towards the male gender. Nice guys, you are the fucking reason that extreme feminists and feminazis are hateful towards men. I hope you pups enjoyed this video. If so, be sure to mega punch that like button and subscribe to this channel to join the Pupper Pack today. And be sure to click the bell for notifications every time I post a brand new video. If you have a creepy story you'd like to share, be sure to share it in the comments. And I will see you all next time. As always, stay awesome, stay strong, and stay beautiful little pups.